good?
Yep.
Hey, can we sit with you?
So guys, I'm going to be real. We have tried to record this video a couple of different times now. We had actually intended to release this video a couple of weeks ago, but it's a hard story to share. It's a difficult subject to talk about. It's mental health. Something that's really near and dear to our hearts, because it doesn't just hit close to home, it actually hits our home. So I'm just going to share my heart, and we want to share our story, our experience with mental health. So it all started a long time ago. It all started when I was about 16 years old. Grew up in a great family, not perfect. No family's perfect. Nothing was inherently wrong with my life, but all of a sudden, everything in my life, it was like the bottom kind of fell out. I all of a sudden started to get really sick, really sick. But it wasn't a sickness that anybody but me could actually see, or understand. And it just kind of went from bad to worse to even worse, and I felt like my life was just in this like tailspin into darkness, because of the home that I grew up in, and everything was kind of good. I felt like I just needed to keep up appearances. When we were at church, I felt like I needed to be some kind of way. Like I needed to be happy and pretend like everything was okay. And so I got really good at wearing a mask, at kind of keeping up appearances, of maintaining that facade. And so nobody suspected that on the inside, everything was awful. I hated myself. I hated everything about me. I hated my personality. I hated everything about my appearance, my body, the way that I looked. I didn't hate anyone else. I didn't explode. I imploded. And it just got darker and darker and darker. And day by day by day, it was like my minutes, my hours, my time was filled and consumed with just this inner dialogue of me telling me that I was garbage, that I was worthless, that I had no value, that nobody liked me. And that's one of the gritty realities of struggling with mental health, is that we don't see things necessarily as they actually are. It's almost as if our equilibrium is off. Our head is turned to the side, and we think that that's how the world is. Everyone else can see, as we start to share, that our equilibrium is off, that we're not seeing the horizon as it really is. But from our perspective, that's just how life seems. And so that was me. Things went from bad to worse when my days, went from all of this inner turmoil and all of this self-hatred to actually not wanting to live anymore. I heard myself tell myself that I was garbage for so long, that I was like, if all of this is true about me, then maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe nobody would miss me. I wouldn't miss me. And so the pain that I felt, the anger, just the loathing that I had of myself was so strong that I didn't see any other way to fix it, to end my pain, this like deep, dark suffering that I was feeling, except to commit suicide. And I remember spending time coming up with like plans as to how I was going to do this. And then I started realizing that's not normal behavior. People don't do that. And so it was almost as if in my like deep dark pit surrounded by all this darkness, I had this like moment of lucidity, this moment of clarity, that I realized I needed help. And so I remember talking with my parents, and I felt so ashamed because I knew that there was this stigma attached to this thing that I didn't even fully understand. But I felt so ashamed as I shared with them and told them that I was sick, but it was a sickness that no one else could see. And as I began to share about not wanting to live anymore, I watched the expression on my parents' faces just change. And the expression on their faces wasn't shame. It was they were scared, that their hearts broke for me. And so I then began a process, thankfully, because of reaching out, asking for help, asking my parents for help. I began this long journey of discovering what exactly was wrong and realizing that it wasn't my fault, that I actually have a chemical imbalance. And so began a process of like therapy and counseling and medications and different combinations of medications, and spending more time connecting with God and digging deeper into my faith and spending time in prayer and realizing that who I had begun to think I was actually wasn't who I was. And I stopped listening to that voice in my head telling me that I was garbage, and reading God's word tell me that I was created with a purpose, and that I am his child, and that as much as it's okay to be broken, we're not meant to stay there. And so wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, if you are someone who struggles with mental health, or you know someone who is, it's okay not to be okay. But God doesn't want us to stay that way. You can get help. You can ask for help. And so, my gosh, like 13 or so years later, I never thought my life would be this good. The me that I am today is so different than who I was back then. I don't live every day of my life in a dark, thick cloud of darkness. I live with this vivaciousness, this excitement, this joy, this purpose, this peace, this incredible love, an incredible wife, marriage, children, a calling, a career, a vocation that I love. And so my life is not perfect. My journey of healing is not complete. I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult to share, because people like hearing stories with a period at the end, but my story still has kind of a ... at the end. It's still being written. The wholeness that I have is not complete, and I'm okay with that. I still have a thorn in the flesh, but I no longer define myself by the thorn. It is a part of me. It is not who I am. I don't any longer define myself by my diagnosis. I define myself by who my papa in heaven, who he says I am. The reality is, when Krysten and I started dating, when we, were going through our engagement and we got married, my story became our story. And so that's another part of this that we wanted to share with you guys. And so I'm going to let Krysten share about what it's like from her side.
Oh, babe, I just have to start by saying you're awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. I know that wasn't easy, but I love you. Okay, my side. I remember the night that David shared his story with me. We had actually been dating for 2 months. 2 months at this point, and we were living about 2 hours apart. So every evening we'd chat on the phone, before I headed to bed. I'm the early to bed kind, so I would head to bed and then he would stay up and do work for hours. So, anyways, that evening, we both decided that we were going to share some vulnerable aspects of our life. Not entirely sure how the other person was going to respond. So David shared his story, and honestly, when I was thinking about it, you'd probably have to ask him for my initial response and my immediate response. But I could tell by the tone in his voice that he was worried. He was worried about how I was going to react, worried if this would scare me and kind of be the end of our beginning, right? And I'm going to be honest, I didn't entirely know how to respond. I didn't entirely know what this meant. I didn't know what going forward would look like. But I knew that we would continue to move forward. I knew that him and I, that we were solid, that we were going to make this work. We were going to have the engagement and the wedding and the marriage and the family. There were going to be ups and there were going to be downs, and this would become part of the story. Over the next few months, I'd start to see some more of David's down days. And I remember one day we were talking on the phone, and David was away at school, and he mentioned that he was having an off day. For part of the day, he had decided to stay in his dorm room, and I remember him telling me that he was just going to listen to Screamo music. And
Still do.
I'm not a fan of Screamo music, but that wasn't the point. I started to see that this affected him on a daily basis. Some days were easier than others for him. Up to that point, I'd pretty much only seen his good days. But he was now starting to let me see that he had some bad days too. I remember about 4 months into our relationship, I was having a conversation with my mom. Oh, I don't know why that got me. I filled her in on everything that David had told me up until that point, and I explained to her some of my own fears. How would this impact our marriage? How would it impact potential kids? And I remember my mom pausing me in the midst of, the fears of the fears of our unknown future, and then asking in such a loving way. She asked me if this diagnosis had occurred later in your relationship or had occurred in the middle of your marriage, what would you have done? And I remember thinking about it and thinking, well, I'd stick it out. We'd find a way, right? And I loved him. I loved all of him. So thanks, Mom. David and I continued building our relationship, and we maneuvered through the good, and we maneuvered through some of the harder days, and we knew that we could trust God. When we were engaged, we worked through David's diagnosis in our pre-marriage counseling. We didn't shy away from it, but we talked about it, and we talked about how it was going to impact our future and how we were going to work through it. Over the years of marriage, David, he's had some darker weeks, some off days, as we call it, but I've learned something over the years. I've learned that I unfortunately can't fix it. I like to fix things, okay? I like to come in, I like to make them better, but this is something I couldn't fix. What I've learned, though, is that I can't fix it, and when I can't fix it, I can show up, and I can be present, and I can love. I can show more grace on the harder days. And when they come, and although he's gotten pretty good at taking his medication and taking care of his body, his mind, and his spirit, some off days still occur. But together, we will face this obstacle, and we know that we'll maneuver through it.
Oh, I love you.
Back at you.
So much that that we could say about this subject. And so this is going to be the first of many videos where we'll talk about mental health, because there's so much more that we want to say. This is meant to be kind of an introduction to our story, and really we want our story to let those of you who struggle with mental health, let you know that you are not alone. If you feel like you are in that pit where it's so dark you can't even see which way is up, you're not alone. You might feel like you are. And I want to encourage you to reach out to someone, a friend, a family member. And for those of you that know friends and family members who do struggle with mental health, just check in with them every now and again and say, like, how are you really doing? I also want to say, like, it gets so much better. Like I said, my story is not finished, and happiness comes and goes, but joy is something that transcends moments and circumstances and sicknesses. It's something that can be held on to. And so while we don't always necessarily have happiness, we can always choose joy. That is so much easier said than done when you struggle with mental health. But you are not alone. And in my deepest, darkest moments, where I at that time didn't want to live anymore, the heart of it was that I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And I've come to realize that I do belong here. And at the heart of why we started this channel and have begun this journey of sharing our lives is because we want to remind you that you actually belong here.